8. Then, with astounding suddenness, something happened that changed his plans and put an end to his burglaries. Mr. Macy sent for him one afternoon, and with a great show of jovial mystery asked him if he had had an engagement that night. If he hadn't, would he please call on Mr. Alfred J. Fraser at 8 o'clock? Dalrymple's wonder was mingled with uncertainty. He debated with himself whether it were not his cue to take the first train out of town. But an hour's consideration decided him that his fears were unfounded, and at 8 o'clock he arrived at the big Fraser house in Fillmore Avenue. Mr. Fraser was commonly supposed to be the biggest political influence in the city. His brother was Senator Fraser, his son-in-law Congressman Deming, and his influence, though not wielded in such a way as to make him an objectionable boss, was strong nevertheless. He had a great huge face, deep-set eyes, and a barn door of an upper lip, the melange approaching a worthy climax in a long professional jaw. During his conversation with Dalrymple, his expression kept starting towards a smile, reaching a cheerful optimism, and then receding back into imperturbability. "How do you do, sir?" he said, holding out his hand. "Sit down. I suppose you're wondering why I wanted you. Sit down." Dalrymple sat down. "Mr. Dalrymple, how old are you?" "I'm 23. "You're young, but that doesn't mean you're foolish. Mr. Dalrymple, what I've got to say won't take long. I'm going to make you a proposition. To begin at the beginning, I've been watching you ever since last 4th of July when you made that speech in response to the loving cup." Dalrymple murmured disparagingly, but Fraser waved him to silence. "It was a speech, I've remembered. It was a brainy speech, straight for the shoulder, and it got to everybody in that crowd. I know. I've watched crowds for years." He cleared his throat as if tempted to digress on his knowledge of crowds, then continued. "But, Mr. Dalrymple, I've seen too many young men who promised brilliantly to go to pieces fail through want of steadiness, too many high-powered ideas, and not enough willingness to work. So I waited. I wanted to see what you'd do. I wanted to see if you'd go to work, and if you'd stick to what you started." Dalrymple felt a glow settle over him. "So," continued Fraser, "when Theron Macy told me you'd started down at his place, I kept a watch on you, and followed your record through him. The first month I was afraid for a while. He told me that you were getting restless, too good for your job, hinting around for a raise." Dalrymple started. "But," he said, "after you evidently made up your mind to shut up and stick to it. That's the stuff I like in a young man. That's the stuff that wins out. And don't think I don't understand. I know how much harder it was for you after all that silly flattery a lot of old women have been giving you. I know what a fight it must have been." Dalrymple's face was burning brightly. It felt young and strangely ingenuous. "Dalrymple, you've got brains and you've got the stuff in you, and that's what I want. I'm going to put you into the state senate." "The what?" "The state senate. We want a young man who has got brains, but is solid and not a loafer. When I say state senate, I don't stop there. We're up against it here, Dalrymple. We've got to get some young men into politics. You know the old blood has been running on the party ticket year in and year out." Dalrymple licked his lips. "You'll run me for the state senate?" "I'll put you in the state senate." Mr. Fraser's expression had now reached the point nearest a smile, and Dalrymple had a happy frivolity. He felt himself urging it mentally on, but it stopped, locked, and slid from him. The barn door and the jaw were separated by a line straight as a nail. Dalrymple remembered with an effort that it was a mouth, and talked to it. "But I'm through," he said. "My notoriety's dead. People are fed up with me." "Those things," answered Mr. Fraser, "are mechanical. Linotype is a resuscitator of reputations. Wait till you see the Herald. Beginning next week, that's if you're with us, that is." And his voice hardened slightly. "If you haven't gotten too many ideas about how things ought to be run." "No," said Dalrymple, looking him frankly in the eye. "You'll have to give me a lot of advice at first." Very well, I'll take care of your reputation then. Just keep yourself on the right side of the fence. Dalrymple started at this repetition of a phrase he'd thought of so much lately. There was a sudden ring at the doorbell. That's Macy now, observed Fraser, rising. I'll go let him in. The servants have gone to bed. He left Dalrymple there in a dream. The world was opening up suddenly. The United States Senate. So life was this, after all. Cutting corners, common sense, that was the rule. No more foolish risks now unless necessity called. But it was being hard that counted. Never let remorse or self-reproach lose him a night's sleep. Let his life be a sword of courage. There was no payment. All that was drivel. He sprang to his feet with clenched hands in a sort of triumph. Well, Brian, said Mr. Macy, stepping through the portieres. The two older men smiled their half-smiles at him. Well, Brian, said Mr. Macy again. Dalrymple smiled also. How do you do, Mr. Macy? He wondered if some telepathy between them had made this new appreciation possible, some invisible realization. Mr. Macy held out his hand. I'm glad we're going to be associated in this scheme. I've been for you all along, especially lately. I'm glad we're to be on the same side of the fence. I want to thank you, sir, said Dalrymple simply. He felt a whimsical moisture gathering the back of his eyes. That is the end of Dlrympl Goes Wrong by F. Scott Fitzgerald.